So it's currently raining in LA, and I love when it rains in LA because it rarely rains. I went outside and I smelled the fresh air and I was like, wow, this smell is amazing, and I really enjoy this smell. I was sitting outside in my balcony, looking outside in the rain and thinking to myself, wow, it smells so fresh outside. And then I wondered, what is it that I'm actually smelling? What is this smell of rain? Then I went onto my computer, did a little bit of research, and found that the smell of rain has a scientific name to it called petrichor. And in this video, I want to talk about what the smell of rain is, where it comes from, when it was discovered, and why it's so important to us humans, why it's important to us. So what you're smelling when it rains is a combination of chemical compounds that get released into the air. The scientific name for the smell of rain is called petrichor, which comes from petra, meaning stone, and ichor, meaning the blood of the Greek gods. So putting it together, it means the blood of the stone. Yeah, which is a pretty cool, awesome name for it. So before its discovery, humans knew this smell, but didn't know what caused it. All they knew is that this smell meant that rain was coming. However, ancient Indian civilization dating 5,000 years ago, they were able to extract the smell of rain using baked clay, creating it into a perfume called miti attar. And this fragrance is still used today. Petrichor was coined in 1964 by two Australian scientists, Isabel Joy Baer and Richard Grenfell Thomas. They coined this term in their Nature paper. This paper not only coined the term, but they proved that petrichor comes from a complex mixture of organic molecules formed and stored on mineral and rocks through atmospheric exposure and catalytic surface chemistry. So before this paper was published, the general consensus was that the smell of rain was coming from either plant decay, soil bacteria, or fungi, which they weren't totally wrong, but these Australian scientists showed that the smell was also coming from minerals and rocks, and were the first to scientifically extract that earthy rain smell. So in this experiment, they took minerals and rocks and they heated it up to 600 degrees Celsius, where you can eliminate microbes, viruses, organic living things on the rocks, which is around 3 times hotter than a conventional oven. Once they heated these rocks and cleaned them, they let these rocks sit in the air for months and then wet them, and they found out that they can still smell that earthy smell, which proved to them that a smell of rain wasn't coming just from soil bacteria. In this experiment, they were able to extract the smell and then figure out what chemicals make part of that smell. This experiment showed them that petrichor didn't come from one molecule. It came from a combination of many chemical molecules, and it also told them that the smell comes from minerals and rocks as well. So basically, the rocks and the minerals store the chemical compounds and plant oils that get absorbed into them and then get released when they get wet. But this turned out to only be part of the story. So scientists figured out that there was another major contributor to the smell of rain from actually living organisms. So a year later, in 1965, American scientists Nancy N. Gerber and Hubert A. Le Chevalier published a paper called Geosmin, an earthy smelling substance isolated from actinomycetes, in which they isolated the geosmin compound from soil bacteria called actinomycetes and described it as the substance responsible for the earthy smell of soil. So geosmin is a small organic terpene alcohol molecule produced by soil bacteria. These bacteria live in soil and then release the geosmin as part of their normal metabolic process. So scientists believe that the geosmin helps the bacteria communicate or interact with the environment, although they are still figuring out why exactly the soil bacteria produce this compound. But what makes geosmin so special is that humans are actually very sensitive to the smell of geosmin. We can detect it at parts per trillion, which is one of the lowest detection thresholds known for any smell. So to put it into perspective, take 1 drop of geosmin and drop it in 20 Olympic-sized pools, and humans are still able to smell it. Pretty cool. Scientists think that the reason why we're so sensitive to the smell is because it helped us locate fresh water, fertile land, or figure out weather patterns. So once scientists figured out what made up the smell of rain, the next question was, how exactly does it get into the air? Well, in 2015, MIT scientists Young Soo Jung and Professor Cullen R. Buey published an article where they filmed raindrops falling on soil in slow motion using a high-speed camera. And they were able to capture how the rainfall falls onto the ground, and then how the air bubbles basically fizz up onto the surface and then get released into the air, potentially showing the mechanism by how the smell of rain gets released into the air. So petrichor is made up of geosmin that comes from soil bacteria, but also plant oils and other organic compounds that get stored and land on rocks and minerals. And while most of the smell comes from the ground, sometimes we are also able to smell something extra coming from the sky during storms. Sometimes you might notice a sharp, pungent smell right before a thunderstorm, and that smell comes from ozone, which is a colorless gas. Molecularly, it is O3. During thunderstorms, lightning and electrical activity in the atmosphere can split oxygen molecules apart, and then they recombine as O3 and form ozone. So the wind carries ozone to the ground level before it starts raining, which is why sometimes we're able to smell rain before it actually rains. Yeah. Ozone was actually discovered because of its smell. In the late 1700s, scientists noticed a sharp odor during electrical experiments, and then later realized that it was the same smell that they smelled right before thunderstorms. In 1840, Christian Frederick Schobein isolated the gas and named it ozone, which comes from the Greek word the smell. So ozone isn't considered to be part of petrichor, but it's still associated with the smell of rain because we typically smell it right before a thunderstorm. So yeah, that's the smell of rain. Humans are very sensitive to parts of this smell, and what you're actually smelling is a combination of chemistry, biology, and physics working together. So the next time you smell the rain, remember the name petrichor, the blood of the stone, aka the smell of rain.